I was already a little bit burned out on tenants because I've got 14 Airbnb units of my own that have 8 to 10 tenants a month because they're constantly rotating, plus another 75 that our property management company is managing. So I was a little off on tenants. And the third thing was self-storage. And I was like, let me get this straight. You're going to rent someone a box of air. There's no kitchen, there's no bathroom, and hopefully there's no one living in the property. I was like, that's it. That's the way for me. And I started the aggressive pursuit of self-storage. I met my partners through some of the local networking events and then discovered the idea of conversion projects with them. It's where you buy an old vacant big box retail building. Like we bought a Kmart building together for dirt cheap because nobody wants 100,000 square feet of big box retail space. We converted it to a climate controlled self-storage facility. The value exploded very quickly. And I was like, oh, I get this. And the strategy jumped off the page because it's what I was already doing with quadplexes. Bad long-term tenants in place, you move those out, you convert it to an Airbnb, you change it to a different asset class, which changes the formula by which the asset is valued. So that was what moved the needle for us. We bought a Kmart building for 1.5 million. We put 2.5 into it, put it appraised for 9.
Welcome to the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. In the Champions Corner edition, I'm Mike Deaton, and together with Ligia, my co-host in life, business, and this podcast, we're taking you into the training room, deep in the dojo, sharing the secrets of what it takes to forge a champion. We're digging deep into mindset mastery, high performance habits, best in class behaviors, and bringing you the tips and techniques that maximize human potential, brought to you from some of the best in the business.
So grab your buds and your seat. Hit subscribe and get ready to up your game. Let's do the show.
Let's do it.
Clint Harris is a seasoned real estate investor, entrepreneur, and capital raising expert at Nomadic Capital. With a rich background in medical sales, Clint shifted gears into real estate, building a successful multifamily portfolio and converting properties into high-performing Airbnbs. But his frustration with property management led him to found Going Coastal Property Management Company, providing solutions for his own and others' investments. Seeking diversification, Clint transitioned into self-storage, becoming a general partner at Nomad Capital, where he converts old real estate spaces into thriving self-storage facilities. Having raised capital for over $100 million in assets, Clint's mission is to help other investors achieve financial, location, and time independence. Let's get in the Champions Corner with Clint Harris.
Clint Harris, thanks for joining us on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. We're looking forward to a fun discussion today.
Yes, welcome,
Thank you.
Clint.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and connect with y'all.
Yeah, a lot of great talking real estate today. I think at least that's the forefront. So a lot of good experience there. We're familiar with a little bit of your background, but for the listeners, maybe just give us a rundown of any relevant information pre-real estate, if there was such a thing, and then how you drifted into where you are.
Sure. Yeah. Real estate is not my background. So I had a career, 16-year career in medical sales. I was implanting pacemakers and defibrillators. So I was in surgery, usually 3 to 5 cases a day, putting pacemakers in, working with cardiologists and electrophysiologists and surgeons. So that was my life for a long time. It's a young man's game. It can wear you out. It's a pretty high ceiling financially, but a lot of time on call. As you can imagine, heart problems are not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So getting called at 2 or 3 in the morning in all different directions for people going to the emergency room or having issues or whatever. And I knew that if I ever wanted an off ramp from that lifestyle, it was going to have to be something that I created. I grew up, I'm one of 6 kids in a lower middle class family, and kind of knew that if I ever wanted anything, I was going to have to figure it out on my own. Fast forwarding through, I chose real estate as the way that I was going to do that. And then did it wrong for a lot of years. I didn't understand and appreciate the value of networking. I had a small portfolio of 9 single family homes, accidentally did the BRRRR strategy a couple times. And then I took a promotion in 2017. My wife and I moved to the beach at Wilmington, North Carolina. As I was building a medical sales territory, we started buying small properties at the beach, multifamily properties, and converting them to Airbnbs. We had a lot of financial success there, but it did not come with time or location independence. So for the second time, I built a portfolio the wrong way. And then from there, forayed into commercial real estate and specifically started doing some self-storage. We can dive into that a little bit more, but that's what changed. It moved the needle for us in a meaningful way. And I left medical sales behind in 2022, and I'm a full-time real estate investor now.
Love that. Yeah, we talk to a lot of people who are, for some reason, dissatisfied with whatever they're doing, whether it's most of the time it is time, it's a time element of time freedom, and want to get into real estate as a way to unlock all of that time, location, finances. What was your spark that got you into real estate? Was there something did you know somebody, or did you, like for us, Rich Dad Poor Dad was fundamental
Yeah.
in awakening this real estate and cash flow type
Wow.
spark. But
The purple Bible, huh?
yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
got you too, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, but the biggest thing is that working in medical sales is a very demanding job. I didn't have a lot of time, and your options are like investing in someone else's business, and starting out, I didn't have a lot of meaningful capital. And so real estate was just proven over history, thousands of years, it's generated more wealthy people and families than anything else. So it's fairly easy. Like, you don't have to dig very far before you find the real estate bucket. It was this post 2008 crash. So properties were dirt cheap. I was living in Columbia, South Carolina. I could buy a small brick house for 30 grand.
Wow.
And that was the strategy. That I did have a friend who introduced me to a real estate agent who was the best real estate investor that I knew. He had 40 or 50 of these little properties. In retrospect, he was not very good being a real estate investor, but he was the best person that I knew. And I was renting books on CD from the library. This is pre Bigger Pockets days, pre podcast days, pre
Yeah.
local meetups and things like that. So I was listening to the same like 10 or 12 CDs over and over, and doing most of it poorly. And I built up that small portfolio of 9 single family homes and learned exactly what you said, is that, like, if what I'm going for is time independence, it's a really slow way to get ahead. And the lesson I learned is it's really not about the next property. It's about, are you hindering your ability to go after the one after that? And to have enough single family homes, it was ridiculous. So then that's what I made the jump to multifamily when we relocated to Wilmington.
And these were
Uh,
recourse 4 units and less type multifamily?
yeah, duplex. I still own 1 duplex and 3 quadplexes.
Yeah.
So just small multifamily properties with bad long-term tenants in place. There's a little island community called Carolina Beach where we live, which was turning over fairly quickly, but it still had some older tenants that had been there for a long time, chain smoking in the property and rough properties. But I was getting those tenants, buying it as a long-term rental, and over time moving the tenants out, renovating and converting those properties to Airbnb properties, which
Mhm.
would 3.5 to 4x the gross potential rental income. So that was great. I replaced my income that way. I was like,
Uh-huh.
okay, we've hit a level of financial independence, but at what cost? For the second time, I built a portfolio the wrong way. And I realized that even when I wasn't working, I still had my phone on me, and it didn't give me time or location independence. And that's when I realized we all are chasing financial independence. It's a buzzword, but that's not really what we want.
Yeah.
What we want is financial, time, and location independence, because those three things together create independence of purpose. And that's where you go where you want, when you want, do what you want. You choose what your purchase for your life is, whether it can be having fun and sailing and fishing, or it can be taking care of a friend or a family member that really needs you, or raising your kids intentionally and trying to build character. That freedom of purpose is really what we want.
Mm.
And that's, I put that portfolio aside. We built a property management company that could run those properties. And that's when I started the aggressive pursuit of truly passive investment strategies. And that's what took me into self-storage, conversion projects, and $150 million worth of assets under management with my partners.
Yeah, very well said. For sure, all of that plays together, and purpose probably really well defines and incorporates all of that into an umbrella concept, right? Even if you want to be an active real estate professional, right? That can be your
Sure.
purpose if you want to be doing. Did you make a clean break with medical sales, or was there some overlap until you replaced your salary, as you call it, before you took your foot out? Or
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the Airbnbs, I was doing all that on the side while I was still in medical sales, and then stopped buying those. Usually, I think I bought the last one in 2020, right before COVID, or after COVID, actually. But I was still working full time doing that. My wife left her job in medical sales and became a realtor. Was obviously, we were doing our projects, but then she's selling other properties as well. And that's when I realized, man, we did this all wrong.
yeah,
We got to go in a different direction. That's when I found a group of older, successful real estate investors that I really looked up to, that all were the guys that could go on the 2-week Alaska fishing trip, and they were doing all the things, right? So like, what are these people doing? When I asked this group, it was ultimately came down to 3 things. It was hard money lending and note lending. And I didn't have the money to 7 figures to start lending people. It was mobile home parks. I was already a little bit burned out on tenants because I've got 14 Airbnb units of my own that have 8 to 10 tenants a month because they're constantly rotating, plus another 75 that our property management company is managing. So I was a little off on tenants. And the third thing was self-storage. And I was like, let me get this straight. You're going to rent someone a box of air. There's no kitchen, there's no bathroom, and hopefully there's no one living in the property. I was like, that's it. That's the way for me. And I started the aggressive pursuit of self-storage. I met my partners through some of the local networking events and then discovered the idea of conversion projects with them. It's where you buy an old vacant big box retail building. Like we bought a Kmart building together for dirt cheap because nobody wants 100,000 square feet of big box retail space. We converted it to a climate controlled self-storage facility. The value exploded very quickly. And I was like, oh, I get this. And the strategy jumped off the page because it's what I was already doing with quadplexes. Bad long-term tenants in place, you move those out, you convert it to an Airbnb, you change it to a different asset class, which changes the formula by which the asset is valued. So that was what moved the needle for us. We bought a Kmart building for 1.5 million. We put 2.5 into it. It was my partners and I, and about half dozen of the doctors that I worked with. So that kind of had that network, that background. All my friends are physicians, right? And they all have money, but no time. And without time, you can't get experience, right? So we did a Kmart, 1.5 million, put 2.5 into it. It appraised for 9. And we're like, oh, this is real. So then we did another one, then another one. And then in November of 2022, I was looking, how am I going to get out of medical sales, but keep these relationships, making sure they're taken care of, the patients are taken care of, and everything like that. And the company that I was with made some bad decisions and got kicked out. It was over like that. I did 5 surgeries on a Friday. I had 3 more on a Monday morning, standing in the grocery line Friday evening. I get the call, 60-second call. It's over. I had immediate opportunity, had offers from the competition to immediately jump to 2 other companies, and my doctors were rooting for me and really wanted me to. And I said no, because I'd been looking for what is that? It happened a year faster than I thought it was going to, but it was an opportunity for a clean break when it wasn't my fault. And so did the best I could to make sure everybody was set up and in good shape, and started this wild ride in November of 2022.
Yeah, that's interesting. Ligia and I have a similar kind of, fortunately for you, you started your journey in parallel and had prepared somewhat of a runway for that to happen. We both in 2016 got let go from our companies, and that was it. Like we didn't have any rental
Wow.
properties or anything like that. Thankfully, we had capital, we had money in the bank, we got a severance. And so we had the ability to float for some time and to reinvent ourselves. But it was a little unnerving, and definitely, I like to think I would do it a different way. I'm a kind of burn the boats all in
Mhm.
personality. And so I don't know if I would have ever executed on it if it had to happen that way. But it is a fundamental something we preach all the time to anybody we network with. It is start overlapping and then work yourself out. Once you feel comfortable, once you get to a certain income level or whatever it is for you, then step out and do it that way. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I'll add on one thing there is I had a plan a year or 2 later, I'm gonna make the transition out, let a few of these deals go full cycle. But that's not what happened. And the reality is we'll never know if I would have really had the courage to do that. Medical sales is a pretty high ceiling.
yeah.
It's a demanding lifestyle, but it's a high ceiling. And so the question is, would I have had the courage to walk away from that, or would those golden handcuffs have kept me there?
Right.
And in retrospect, everything happened exactly the way that it should have, and I'm on to bigger and better things. But the reality is that decision got made for me, and it happened for you too, and not the way that you would want. But here you are. You've clearly done a good job of reinventing yourself. You made yourself a lightning rod of great conversations by hosting a podcast like this. In retrospect, looking back on that, when people are in a similar situation and asking, should I burn the boats a deal? For me, it makes so much sense to look at it and be like, okay, you know how much you're making, you know what your quality of life is and what your time commitment is. So you should be able to extrapolate that and see what's the ceiling? Like, what's the ceiling for my life and the meaningful relationships that I get to have and the amount of time I get to spend with my family? If that's enough for you, then great. Keep doing it. Live your life. If you decide that's not enough for you, then your question is, "Oh, should I go do something else? There's so much risk." If you've decided that limit is not enough for what you want for your life, then the only real risk is not doing something,
Mhm.
right? Not doing something differently because you're setting yourself up to not hit the own goals and the expectations that you have for your existence, which is very fleeting on this planet. Listen, I got bad news for you. The reality is, best case scenario, somewhere between 80 and 120 years, all of our DNA is gonna peter out. Like, we're here for a blip, but the reality is if that expectation isn't for what you want for your family, the only real risk is not doing something differently.
Yeah, we look back on that and have that exact same perspective. It's so clear when you look back that the real risk is not doing the thing and staying in your current state, unless, like you said, it's meeting all of your needs. We took a moment. We were fortunate enough in that moment. I had job opportunities on the West Coast and to get in with other tech companies. I was already traveling 25, 50% of the month. We weren't spending a whole lot of time together, quality time. And we had the good fortune to be able to step back and do some values exercises, understand what we wanted out of the rest of our lives, and the courage to take the decision to give it a shot and to go. But yeah, it's a great observation I think monetarily, it's really easy to sit back and reflect. I'm making X, it covers this and do that. It's all the other stuff that most of us, I would say, don't do a good job of reflecting on. Are my relationships as healthy as I want them to be? Am I having the adventures I want to have out of life? Am I making new friendships and networking and growing as a person? All those kind of things. I think it's a rare person that does sit down on the regular and assess. There's different people, Michael Hyatt, Tony Robbins, all these people have different aspects of the wheel of life, domains of life, whatever. But am I 8 out of 10 or am I 2 out of 10 in my relationship segment or something like that? That's where I think we just get caught up in how much of a
Yeah.
salary am I making and what are my benefits?
And it's really easy to look back after the fact of a big career change like the 3 of us have had and
Yeah.
sound really brave about it. Be like, "Oh, yeah, this is
Yes.
I know exactly what I was doing." Like, at the time, I was like, "I don't know what's happening,
Yeah.
man. We're gonna wing it and see what happens." In retrospect, there's this false bravado that comes out that made it look like you steered your life there because you knew what was gonna happen. The reality is no one does,
Yeah.
but I will tell you this, risk is a muscle, and for me, the more that I've stretched and worked that muscle, it makes it I'm much more confident in taking on challenges without knowing the outcome because I've done it before.
Yeah.
And the worst case scenario is usually not really that bad in the grand scheme of things. But the first time, that first step is like stepping out of an airplane, right?
Right.
It's a big one. And after you're on the ground, it's, oh, yeah, had it the whole way. That was no problem. But yeah, it's a lot.
Clint, before we go a little bit deeper into what you're doing, do you mind elaborating a little bit on this concept of networking? You mentioned earlier that this real estate investor that you met back when, before you bought your houses, and it was the best person you knew. And I would imagine for you was also a journey. You realized probably that you have to expand your network. What was the criteria for you in finding the right network?
This is a really great question and an important topic. And I believe that who we are as individuals right now, and you can, as a person, but especially when it comes to real estate and any kind of success or entrepreneurial vision that you have for your life, who we are right now is the same people we were 10 years ago and the same people we're going to be 10 years from now, with the exception of the places we go, the people we meet, the books and content that we consume. So making sure that you've got information coming into your life and that information is great, like books, podcasts, that's important. But what's more important is relationships. And if you can get that information from a group of people, that's the best way. And some of the things that you learn are not going to be things that you want to remember or practice on. But the reality is, like, especially starting out for me, my job always is to try to put myself in a room where I'm the dumbest one there, right? Very easy a lot of the time, right? And the situation is you're always going to learn something from someone. And it's real estate investors. I don't know if it's an abundance mindset or if it's just arrogance or competition or ego, but we love talking about real estate. Right? We love talking about this deal that I found or this strategy that I learned and I think most of the time it really comes from a meaningful way of helping people. So if you can connect those like-minded people, the local meetups, obviously podcast is a great way to connect, but we have 3 local real estate meetups here in town. I host one of them. And we have an alternative investing mastermind meetup once a month. I do a podcast just to networking. I never would have had a chance to connect with you two otherwise.
Yeah.
Just making yourself available. And I don't think there has to be a criteria as to who I want to surround myself with for me to have a conversation, but there is criteria that I have of what kind of people, what kind of ethics am I trying to be surrounded by? What kind of integrity, what kind of relationship with their spouse and their family and things like that. So you learn it all and pick what's good for you, what's important and what's not.
Yeah, that's well said. I am also a fan of networking, surrounding yourself with people that have been down the road that you want to go down. We did it when we got started into multifamily. It was a misstep in that
especially in larger deals, right? Any misstep or mistake can be super, super costly. So and it's almost impossible to do a deal without an experienced person. You can't get a commercial loan or things like that, but it is critical. And just, yeah, that whole aspect of, I like the fact that what I'm picking up from what you're saying is this willingness to be open to both your knowledge level, but also that you can learn from almost anybody. It doesn't have to be exactly a real estate meetup or something, right? You can pick up some entrepreneurial tips from just somebody that you meet in a casual environment or something like that. So it's really, I think that's really key to growing both as a business person and as an investor, is just that willingness to learn.
Totally agree with you. There's a book that really changed things for me. Is that we were building out our property management company, and I was part of the entrepreneurial journey. Is how do I do this, and how do I do that, and how do I do this? And you're trying to figure out all these hows, and it's overwhelming. And I read a book by Dan Sullivan called "Who Not How,"
Mm.
and the idea was, yeah, I'm sure you've heard it. It's a pretty popular book, and it's the idea is I don't need to know how to do all these different things. I don't need to know how to buy an apartment building or get a commercial loan or get somebody to sign on the debt for me or whatever. I just need to know who do I have that's better at that than I am. And that's coming from the power of community, right? So
Yeah.
in terms of our company, the company I was operating and doing okay, I've got some great partners. I took a step back from the company and let my operating partner and one of our managers take over, and it thrived quickly. And I was like, that's humbling. That kind of stinks, right? I was steering the ship and all of a sudden I get out of the way and it's doing a lot better. But it was because of that book. And the reality is I don't need to know how to do I don't need to know how to do everything. The best gift that I can have or the best skill that I can develop is to try to be really good at recognizing who I have that could do it better than I could. And that is just going to come from like an arsenal of good relationships and people willing to share when you run into a problem. Very likely somebody else has already napped.
Yep. We know it and love it. It's sometimes hard to put in practice the who, not how, and
Oh,
it's not, it doesn't work right out of the gates all the time. I think was what trips us. Sometimes you have to test and iterate and until you find that right person. But yeah, great. We love Dancel.
And it takes that kind of the right humbleness to say, hey, I'm stepping out, I'm stepping down because someone else can do this better than me. It's the right type of humbleness that not all of us have it. And we need to kind
well,
of cultivate it, really.
For sure.
I don't naturally have it. I'm a confident person. My wife would probably say cocky, but the reality is that humility, like the results were there. Whether I want to admit it or not,
Yeah.
the reality is like you can hold yourself accountable. You can give yourself a report card and also recognize talent and empower those people to go be great. But yeah, there was I had to eat a little crow on that one, a little bit of humble pie. That's okay.
Few different avenues I want to take. I'm trying to decide which one to jump in on, but let's talk self-storage conversion. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that and how, and then we can dovetail into kind of this truly passive income investment. I'm guessing, oh, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing you're not truly passive in your investments. It sounds like you are an active part of a management company and a business owner, if not even somewhat of a participant. But how did you guys set all that up? Or what was your journey stepping into that if it wasn't? I'm assuming your partnerships evolved over the course of those
Sure.
deals. And you also touched on the fact that it sounds like, I was going to ask earlier, but the conversation went a different direction. But it sounds like you guys are doing this value add and then positioning for a sale, and that's how you're getting some capital out in return to your investors?
Yeah, there's a couple different strategies. So, spoiler alert, there is no truly passive income. I've learned
Yes,
this
thank
after
you.
studying it, right? Even if it's just like picking a sponsor and like vetting them and doing due diligence and trusting that person, putting your money in and never even reading the monthly updates.
Yep.
It still requires some energy, right? So that's a little bit of a misnomer. Should have thought that through when we named the
Yeah.
podcast. So yeah, so I'm one of the general partners with Nomad Capital. And what we do is we buy old vacant big box retail buildings like Kmart's, grocery stores, warehouses, and textile mills, and we convert them into climate controlled self-storage facilities. It's not rocket science. We buy a great big box, break it up into about 600 little boxes, and rent them out to people for storage. Here's the reason that it works. If you and I decided to go build a self-storage facility from the ground up right now, it's going to cost us around $120 a square foot plus the cost of the land. And it's going to take 3 to 4 years to do the permitting, engineering, construction, everything else. And then you got to fill it up. So across the last 3.5 years, we bought 2 Kmart's, 3 warehouses, 2 textile mills, a grocery store, and an old soda bottling facility. And we've converted all those to climate controlled storage. And across that portfolio, for the cost of the building, the land, the construction, the parking lot, everything, our average is just under $65 a square foot.
Oh, wow.
There is very little appetite for a 100,000 square foot Kmart that's been empty for
Yeah.
10 or 12 years and it's got a hole in the roof and it's just sitting there. But if you think about where it is, great visibility, great traffic count. There's a reason that community used to drive to that building to buy their home goods. And even though they don't do that anymore because Walmart and Amazon put them out of business, it still makes sense for those same people to drive back to the same building and pay us to put the same stuff right back inside of it, right? It's an inverse flow of the little micro economy. And the key is that we're getting a self-storage facility for less than half the cost of new development and in about a third of the time, right? It's called adaptive reuse. Same thing I was doing with a quadplex with bad tenants and converting it to an Airbnb, changed the formula by which it is valued. A typical deal for us, we will buy an old building for 1 to 2 or 3 million. We'll put 2 to 3 million into it. And as a stabilized self-storage facility, typically they will appraise in the $13 to $17 million range because the value is based upon the net operating income coming out of the property. My partners are the general contractors, 30 years of construction experience. I've got a medical sales background and a large community of white coat professionals and physicians that I work with. So our first 3 or 4 deals was predominantly doctors I worked with would put money in together. We're 506B syndication, syndication is where a group of people pool money together to take on a project larger than what any one individual could likely do on their own. Since then, we do 506B and 506C projects, which is where, to the point we are now, we have meta ads running Facebook, Instagram about our strategy, about our group. We're sitting on 150 million in assets under management right now. We've got a pipeline to get to 300 million in the next couple of years, 100 million in 5 years, and $1 billion in 10. And that's our strategy of where we're going. So we're running ads. My job is to handle investor relations. I like to say investor education and obviously raise capital. My partners are the general contractors. I'm one of the 4 general partners. We have 16 employees. And that's our strategy. That's all that we do is we buy old vacant big box retail buildings. We convert them to climate controlled storage. What really matters is about a 7-mile radius. There's a lot of storage in the nation. People are worried about saturation. But the reality is if I've got 10,000 people in a 1-mile radius and 25,000 in a 3-mile, and I'm getting the building for less than $20 a square foot, and I've navigated all the permitting issues and the phase 1, phase 2 mitigation issues, if there's lead or asbestos or whatever, I make it sound easy. It's not. These are very challenging projects, but we have full vertical integration, meaning I got an acquisition team looking at 50 to 70 properties a week to get down to maybe 1 or 2 a month that we're going to send a letter of intent on. My partners are the general contractors. We're building at cost plus 12%. And then we have in-house property and asset management under the brand name City Storage. We manage them ourselves. The end result is our cost basis is so low on these projects that when we stabilize, we're usually landing in the 35 to 40% loan to value range, which means, like you mentioned, we can sell them and we know we're going to trim a few off the portfolio as we go along and just recapitalize. But our general strategy is we do a cash out refinance to 55 or 60% loan to value, always fixed rate debt, never use variable rate debt. That's going to allow us to pull out millions of dollars to pay out our investors, give them a return of capital plus a big chunk on top and keep money for Nomad as well. And when we do it that way, it's not a capital event. So it's non-taxable. After that, everybody stays in. We keep our investors in the deal. We hold it long-term. Inflation is obviously something we all have to think about. Self-storage is a very inflation-resistant asset class. Everything's on a month-to-month basis. We hit 9% inflation like we do 2 years ago. Our prices are going up according. It's pandemic resistant. Usually has about a 30% expense ratio when you open up a new facility because you're doing the half off the first month, 2 months for $1 or whatever marketing. As it fills up and you stabilize, that expense ratio usually drops into the 21 to 24% range. For us, we're turning a Kmart into a big ATM that our friends, family, and investors can stay in, and we just hold them together for the long term.
Yeah, man, it sounds like a dream. But you touched on it. I was wanting to ask this, and maybe we can put a little more meat on it. But what does the investor journey look like? So somebody comes, puts 100K into your deal. It sounds like ideally there's at some point 2, 3, 4 years down the road, a refi, cash out. Is there an out for people, or is this
Yeah.
coming in? Or is it the understanding that we're going to hold this in perpetuity and just draw profits off of it? Or what is that? And I'm sure they're all a little bit nuanced, but Oh, what an average, what does something look like or how do you position it?
Yeah, you're hitting some really important because the number one thing is like people need to know and trust us, but also like we need to know and trust them because we're talking about being in business together for a very long time.
Mhm.
So the most important thing is like identifying goals and what are you trying to accomplish? And if you're looking for immediate cash flow, you want a paycheck day one and you're trying to replace income from a job you don't want, you should not invest with us. I'll
Mhm.
be the first one to tell you that. We are developers and these are development deals and it takes a little while. So let's say somebody puts in 100 grand from the day that they put their money in, they're earning what's called a preferred return. But remember, we buy an old Kmart, it's nasty. We want the dog. And when you make your money on a flip, you don't make your money when you sold it or renovated it. You made your money when it smelled like dogs and cats and you bought
Mhm.
it for dirt cheap. Those are the properties we want. We want the ugly ducklings. So your money goes in, you'll start earning a preferred return from day one, but that property is not cash flowing. It's going to take us a year to build it out. And after that, depending on the size, it could take us 18 to 30 months to fill it up. The great news is our properties cash flow at about 40% occupancy. Average is usually in the 60 to 70% range. But from the day your money goes in, you're earning that return. But it's going to take 2.5 to 3 years. As soon as the property becomes cash flow positive, all of it comes out and goes right back to the investors to catch them up.
Mhm.
And then everybody's getting quarterly cash flow distributions. And then we're saying at or before year 5, cash out refinance, you'd get your 100 grand back plus another 60 to 70 non-taxable on top of that. You should have already got the other 30 to 40 from the preferred return in the cash flow. So we try to come close to doubling people's money tax-free in 5 years or less. We do the cost segregation study and take the accelerated depreciation to offset the taxable portion. Beyond that, right now, like we have a fund open and it's 10 years. So you get that fairly good return up front and then cash flow year 6 through 10. There's another cash event at year 10. We could refinance one of the 5 properties that's in this current fund. The idea is, yes, we can sell properties. We always have multiple exit strategies. The idea is to wait until someone makes an offer that is irresponsible to the investors and ourselves not to take it. And besides that, like my partner built his first self-storage facility from the ground up in 2006 and has since doubled the size of the facility, still owns it. The only facility out of everything that we've ever sold 2 weeks ago. And that was that he had on a partnership outside of Nomad, pre-Nomad days. We believe in everything we're doing. The heavy work of converting these properties it's so much work up front. If we just build them up and sell them, everybody makes a lot of money and that's great. We're done, right? We get paid one time and we're that house flipper that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And if you're that guy, you're building it up, you're making it nice, and then you're selling it, then the day you stop working is the day that you stop getting paid. The reason our group is called Nomad Capital, talked about this earlier. A nomad is somebody that goes where they want, when they want, and does what they want. And our idea is when my partner built his first self-storage facility in 2006, he was a builder. The market crashed. Nobody's building anything in 2008. He, his wife, and their 5 kids bought a 36-foot catamaran in Greece, sight unseen, and started sailing, waiting on the economy to turn. 6 months in, found out they were pregnant with their 6th, had their 6th child in Jerusalem, sailed for a total of 3.5 years, eventually sailed across the Caribbean, Mediterranean, and then eventually sailed across the Atlantic and landed back in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we are, and started building again. That trip was years before Nomad. That was the spark, right? We all dream of this, like a portfolio of commercial assets that are very easy to manage, that are inflation resistant, that allow you and your family to have a nomadic life if that's what you choose is important to you, that's based upon time, financial, and location independence. So if we sell them off, that's great. But like our core value is that we don't want to trade time for money.
Yep, it's great. I think anybody that listens to it would feel compelled to chase that. We got our start in land and we flip land, right? We, just like you said, we make our money on the buy. We buy it under market value. We flip it at or above market value. But we talk about this lately. Right now, we're happy. We like it. We're also in a little bit commercial. We're happy to be active participants in our deals. But at some point, we're not. We have a lifestyle such that we do have all of the freedoms. Like Ligia's from Europe, and we usually take a month or 2 out of the year and we'll go stay with her family and visit people. We can
That's
work from
awesome.
anywhere. We can take time off if we want. Money still comes in, that kind of stuff. But at some point, if we stop long enough,
Yeah.
our income stops.
Yeah.
And so we're also chasing a little bit this longer term view of buy and hold assets, or you also mentioned taxes, depreciation and all
Sure.
that catches up eventually as well, if you're not actively out there re-upping into deals and things like that. But yeah, it's a great philosophy and life concept. I'm I love the fact that you guys have gone vertical. I appreciate, I know a few other multifamily syndicators and others that are also have a similar model. And I tend to like that, having worked with other third party suppliers, be them contractors
Right.
or property management companies. It's just, it's really challenging. Tell us a little bit about that journey. Was it a frustration with the vendors that were available to you, and or some combination of just wanting to be more cost effective, or all of it?
So my partners, so great question. And a lot of people are trying to work their way into a vertical integration
Mhm.
strategy. For us, it's the opposite. These weren't operators that went out and found a builder. These are builders.
Yeah.
My partners are like, it's a father and son team, Eric and Levi Hemingway. They're swinging the hammers. They're doing all the things, right? And they learned how to become operators versus the other way
Yeah.
around. So we stepped into it the opposite of way that a lot of people do with the home builders for years and years, and then built his first self-storage facility, and then started doing hotels and started doing more self-storage, basically building a portfolio to fund Nomad Capital and what we're doing now. He started managing his first self-storage facility in 2006 when he built it. So that was the brand City Storage started there, and it's continued to grow. But that full vertical integration is so important, especially on a large commercial construction project. If there's a change order and let's say it costs you a nickel a square foot, that can add up a lot. But the big thing is, what's the time? Anytime there's a change order, you can lose a month or two. If we used third party construction to build out our projects, it would take 2 to 2.5 years because we do it in house. Like I'm sitting in our podcast studio right now, but there's a giant bullpen right outside of here that's all project and site supervisors, and they're on it. And if anything ever changes, like we're on it. We're nimble and we're scrappy and we can jump on it right away. Otherwise, it ends up in a stack on somebody's desk sitting there. So that's the component is like our model is to be nimble. If there's an underserved secondary or tertiary market across the Southeast, I want to move into that market, snatch up the old giant textile mill right in the middle of downtown. And that population is having massive population growth because people are getting pushed out of these more urban areas and these small secondary, tertiary markets. Like you're not going to find me in a Charlotte, North Carolina, but you'll find me 15 miles away in Gastonia, where we bought the old Sundrop bottling facility. So, and that area is having massive population growth. There's multifamily properties going in all over the place, but there's an existing demand that is not met because it's a small town. We can buy that 70,000 square foot building, convert it in a year and have it up and running. And it's going to take somebody else. If they can even find the 5 to 7 to 10 acres to build a facility, it's going to take them a couple years to do the permitting, engineering, and everything else. We have to be nimble and quick. And if I come drop 100,000 square feet of storage right in the middle of downtown in your market, it's really hard for anybody else to come in there and decide that they want to compete in that space. So we're doing it for half price. We're doing it in a third of the time. And the reason that time component is there is because we're fully vertically integrated and we can do it in-house. All of that means that's $1 million or $2 million of interest reserves that we don't have to float that loan while you're going through the couple years of building it up. We want to get this thing open and cash flowing as soon as possible.
Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense. You teased something else I wanted to ask you directly is markets are obviously important, but it sounds like you're somewhat market agnostic. If you find the right deal in the right place, you guys are open to do it, or are you just looking in the Southeast region or
We do look everywhere because it's important to stay sharp, and we have acquisition team that's looking all over. But typically we're based in Wilmington, North Carolina. We like North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia. We're looking at Florida, but we don't love it because of the insurance. We're looking at Alabama, a few other places right now. We have 2 projects under construction right now. One of them's opening next month in Lexington, North Carolina. We have one opening about 6 months after that in Kernersville, North Carolina. And then we have 2 under contract right now, closing in a couple weeks on one in Florence, South Carolina. And then we're under contract on one in Albany, Georgia. Those small secondary, tertiary markets across the Southeast, ever since COVID, we've had massive population growth. A lot of people move into those areas. There's a lot of old textile mills, warehouses, big box retail, and stuff like that.
yeah,
And believe it or not, some of them are still popping up and hitting the market left and right. Like Kmart, few of those buildings are still getting paid out by the bankruptcy, even though
right.
they've been empty for a decade, and they're still hitting. So obviously, location is very important. We do in-house and third-party feasibility studies, and we do all the things. But yeah, the location is hyper important, but it really is like a microeconomy.
Yeah.
It's that building, that location, 7-mile radius is what matters.
Mhm.
And we do what we call getting the feels. I've got 2 guys on the ground in Albany, Georgia today driving that property. It's okay if you stand there. If you can smell a Chick-fil-A, you're probably in a really good location, right? If there's a music venue going in a couple miles down the road, like what's happening to the areas? Is there a socioeconomic divide that's happening? Or found one property that we loved, and then we went and got there. There's a ton of people, all these neighborhoods right around there. Then when we got there, there's this big creek that went basically right around the back of this building, and there was only 2 bridges, and they're each a mile away.
Mm.
So like that, you couldn't tell that from the topography, but the reality is like, you got to get there, you got to see it, you got to get the feels, you got to talk to the local agents, you got to talk to the Chamber of Commerce. You want to pull the permits and see what other storage is coming to the area, what other economic development is coming to the area, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially being vertically integrated. You really can't afford to cast your net too wide, right? To be, if you're doing
Sure.
in-house construction and PMing and stuff like that, it can be done, but it's definitely a little more challenging in those ways. I love that. Yeah, you can certainly leverage the talents of other national, or not even national, but other larger companies that are doing the market evaluations and the studies and things like that. If Starbucks or Chick-fil-A's or whoever's coming into an area, you can be sure they've done a little bit of homework to assess the traffic stats and things like that. It's a great way to do it. Get out there.
Yep. A lot of revitalization programs and stuff like that. A lot of breweries, like anytime there's a
Mm.
cool local brewery that just popped up. Yep. Like we're going to be right there.
For multiple reasons.
That's right. Team meeting.
Love it. All right. What else? So it sounds like a lot of your deals are longer term horizons than we're used to multifamily, right? So it's a 5-year flip. You come in, you do a 3-year, maybe 5 or 6 year sale is the business plan. Yours sounds like you're targeting similar, but also holding for up to 10 years. Being that's the case, maybe not since you're dealing with some doctors and people with a good income level. But I would imagine, oh, you're doing some 506C deals as well. So it sounds like you're out there drumming up new business, if you will, just bringing on new investors and trying to expand your equity profile.
Yeah, we are now. And there's actually something to uncover there. When we started out, our average deal, we only need to raise a couple $1,000,000,
Mhm.
right? And which in syndication is not that much.
Yeah.
It's funny to say that word now, and sounded like a lot the first time we had to raise that much money. But the reality is it's a pretty light lift in terms of raising capital for a professional syndication deal. And so we were 506B, which means we could allow non-accredited people to invest in our deals because our friends and our family
Mhm.
wanted to invest with us. And a lot of those were not accredited. Now we have a limit of 35 people per deal. That's the SEC regulations that we're only allowed to have no more than 35 investors per deal. But we would only have 12, 15, 17 people on a Kmart. These are fairly small. We did 506B, raised a lot of money from $10 million or so from, yes, we had accredited investors, the physicians that I work with, but ultimately we had a relationship with everybody. And then as we decided we were going to do a fund, so this year we've got a $10 million fund being used to purchase $30 million worth of projects, which are being converted to $60 to $70 million worth of self-storage facilities. You can't raise $10 million from 35 people. And one of the stipulations of 506B is you can't advertise. You can only talk to
Right.
people you have an existing relationship with. You can't do what's called general solicitation. So we didn't want to leave these investors behind. Our average investor was in like 3 or 4 deals with us. We didn't want to leave those people behind because our job is to build a tribe of real estate nomads. So we opened up our fund as a 506B fund. We got 35 of our non-accredited investors in there. So we have family members, we have friends, we have employees in our company that are making decisions on these construction projects that are invested in our deals, which is great. That's the guy you want invested, right?
Yes.
He's finding every way he can to save 2 cents off per screw on that self-storage
Yes.
facility. We got those people into the deal so that we didn't leave them behind. And then we had our legal team, once we hit that 35 limit, convert that to a 506C.
Hmm.
And then we started a nationwide marketing campaign. So like I said, we've got ads going out, we do webinars, do a podcast, and we talk about it. And it's look at your journey and what you're doing in land flipping. First of all, that's great. And it's what a second act to have after a tech career.
Yeah.
That's incredible. The reality is a lot of people are in that journey somewhere along their real estate line, whether you're a real estate broker or a flipper or a wholesaler. Ultimately, you're trading time for money. And a lot of time we see people get to the point of, listen, we better start holding some rentals to generate some passive income. And then they realize, wow, that's really slow. Let's start doing multifamily. And then they're like, that's a pain. Let's go a little bit bigger so we can afford an on-site property manager. And then that's a headache. And eventually everybody is going to get to a point. Your time is worth more than anything else. And you're willing to take a little bit less by having somebody else do the work and you get your time back. Right. And that's the step of that average investor that I talk to is usually in their 50s, 60s, somewhere in that range. And they've got to that point. The only downside about that is like passively investing in the syndication. It takes a few years to get going, but there's so many different types of ways you could. Multifamily is obviously like probably the 800-pound gorilla in the room. There's also a lot of major pitfalls with that, but you can invest in like ATMs and wineries or self storage
Mm.
or RV parks or mobile homes or tiny home villages or whatever you want to do. The idea is like just trying to find an opportunity where you break that barrier of trading time for money and get into it early enough that it has time to snowball and you start getting, you're buying your time back. The way I think about it is like anytime you make a passive syndication investment, you're buying future days off, right? And eventually you have enough of them, you stop going back to work, right? And the analogy that you use, okay, let's go to Europe for a month or two. Let's visit family. For most of us, most people haven't even made it to that level. So congratulations. That's amazing to have that time and location independence. But at the end of the day, you're shoveling coal into a steam
Mm.
engine, right? And you can stop for a month or two and that thing's going to keep on running because that fire's hot
Yeah.
and it's going to roll. But a month or two down the road, that fire's dying out and metaphorically, and you're losing your steam, right? And the idea is to get to the point where if you're not shoveling coal, that the things can keep running. And you have to have someone in there doing that, right?
Yes.
And to have success with real estate investing, it is always has, always will require three things. And it's time, it's experience, and money.
Mhm.
And the idea is that get to the point where you take your money, you partner it with someone else that has time and experience, and together the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, 100%. You definitely summed it up right there. That's the challenge and the beauty. But it does take, for most of us, for the 99.9% of us that aren't born with a trust fund or things like that, it does take time. And there's a period. And the earlier you get started, the better. And there are so many ways to get started today. You don't need $50,000. There are some investments you can make to get yourself started, or as you did, you start with what you can do, whether that's a small single family or whatever. You just have to realize that it's a path and a journey, and there are some trade-offs along the way until you get
Yep.
to a level where you just can live off of your passive investments, that's a lofty goal, but definitely it's achievable.
It is achievable. And I think that we have a little bit of a almost like time warp in this generation. Think about it, like I'm 41. I got my first phone in high school as a Nokia brick phone.
I
Like
worked for
fast
Nokia. Yeah, it's
forward,
great.
yeah, fast forward, it's everybody's got a computer in their pocket. Our ability to network and find answers to questions is unprecedented.
It's too
And this
much
first
actually right
generation,
now. Yeah.
it is. It's overstimulating,
Yeah.
right? The generation now doesn't even know what it means to be curious about something. You
Yeah.
could just Google it, you look it up. That's good and bad. And I have opinions on that too. But the reality is like, if you can listen to a podcast, and the reason I do a podcast is because someone that is way smarter than me is willing to sit down and give me 30 to 40 years of condensed life experience in an hour, and everything that most people had to learn things by experience or the hard way.
Mm.
And now you're telling me that then it was, if you're really smart, you can learn from the experience of others, but that's limited to the amount of people in your life, which is what the value of networking is. Now the value of networking is exponential because the ability to connect is exponential,
Mhm.
and it's gone out. And like you can time warp 10 years down the line of where you want to be with your investing journey instead of learning all those hard lessons yourself. And I still think there's value because the same thing I was doing with single families and with multifamilies, the same thing we're doing with Kmart's and with
Yeah.
portfolios now. It's just a few more zeros, but it's the same thing. So there's value in that. But the reality is you can pick your destination, somebody that's already done it, work backwards from there. If you ask yourself a question, the answer is, I don't know. That just implies ambiguity. Ambiguity is just a lack of education. And education's free these days. It's like you can network with whoever you want. So if you pick what you're looking for, you can reverse engineer that to where you want to be significantly easier than people have ever been able to do it in the history of the planet.
Yeah, I say it almost every day in some fashion, whether it's online or to somebody or whatever, but there has never been a better time in the history of mankind to chart your own course, to find freedom. There are literally hundreds of thousands of just obscure things you can do from the comfort of your home. You can, right? I see personal branders, digital marketers, graphic designers, just requires a little bit of hustle. Yeah.
Love that.
Those are all just, yeah, incredible observations. The power of today. Yeah, that's funny. I worked with Nokia 99. I think it was my first mobile phone, 1999,
Yeah.
when I went.
It's probably the year I got mine.
Yeah.
It's three times to think about doing something, whether it's real estate or anything entrepreneurial, taking an opportunity. They always say there's three times, and it's yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And the resources right now are ridiculous. In my opinion, this is going to sound arrogant. I haven't figured out how to make it not sound arrogant yet, but like anybody that's not doing something in this generation right now that has a meaningful financial impact on what your financial velocity looks like for your family for the next few generations, I think that's on you, because the opportunity right now to do something that changes the trajectory of what things look like down the road, like you can make changes now that drastically, if I give my kids money, by the third generation, it's probably gone and they're probably horrible people. Like history speaks for itself unless you do it in a responsible way. But if I'm doing things now that affect the amount of time that I get to spend with them, that is likely going to change their character, hopefully in a good way, and who they are in life and the relationships that they have, and likely going to impact the amount of time that they spend with their kids and their kids. And now we're talking about something, a choice that I can make today that has potential to affect 3, 4, 5 generations down the road long after I'm gone, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's not being able to afford an extra vacation or whatever. It's time, right? And freedom of purpose and how you spend that purpose. It can be chasing fun, or it can be doing my job is to die with a giant stack of pictures of things I did in beautiful places with people that I love.
Yeah, I'm all about that too. That's really my driver in life is experiential travel experiences with family and friends. Those are the meaningful things for me as well.
So refreshing what you're saying, because I think it's a huge topic in itself. A lot of parents have the tendency to just really protect their kids and give them everything
Mhm.
they want, and make sure that they have a better lifestyle than us. And it's really sometimes crippling them.
For sure.
But Clint, I
Very
am
much.
curious if, for me and listeners that are really intrigued of what you do, is your fund open? And if it is,
Yeah,
what is
it
the
is right now.
minimum? Mom, what is the minimum that you guys accept as an investment?
It's a $50,000 minimum. We have 3 different share classes, 50, 250, and a million. They have some different return profiles. It's open right now, but honestly, I don't know when this is airing. It's probably going to be closed in the next 30 to 45 days.
Okay.
There's potential that we might be able to squeeze in another property, so maybe a little bit longer. But yeah, the idea is we put a fund together with the idea of, instead of investing in an individual deal, people can invest into a fund that's going to have 5 different facilities. It's the difference in, you can pick a racehorse in this race, or you can be like, let's bet on the jockey. He's going to ride 5 different horses in 5 different races. Gives a little bit of diversification in terms of different asset, different geography, different local operators, and things like that. But yeah,
And
it is currently open right now.
if people are really interested to get in touch with you, what is the best way?
The best way is through our website, Nomad US, or people can email me, clint@nomadcapital.us. I'm clearly an extrovert, clearly long-winded. My apologies to you for that.
No worries.
But I love to learn. I'm a student of the game, and I'm happy to talk with anybody, even if it's questions about Airbnb management or multifamily or anything like that. So always happy to network.
That's great. Yeah. One thing before we close, I did want to circle back on one of the reasons you touched on one of the reasons we started our podcast, which was networking with people, getting ourselves and our audience an exposure to different types of investments and or businesses. But another reason that we really thought we could do differently within our podcast is something like, what are the risks in investing in a self storage? I think a lot of times people get a good marketing pitch on, hey, multifamily is great. You're going to double your money in 5 years, yada, yada, yada. But the risks may be glossed over. If we certainly speak from experience in this, but what are the risks with storage and how do you present that to investors in terms of what those might be?
Yeah. So the number one risk that is a danger to self-storage is more self-storage. So we want to see how much is coming to the area. Maybe sometimes you may have another competitor who's coming into a market, makes a bad decision, or like sometimes they're just dumb. And you're like, why would you drop this facility? And it's already oversaturated. We've seen some of these people put new facilities coming in. It's almost head scratching. There's a facility on either side. They're both 50% full. They've been sitting there for years. Like, that's the biggest threat, is more storage.
Mhm.
And the way that we mitigate that is we're moving into areas that are typically fairly congested. We want to buy the old building and convert it fast and get up and running. And our cost basis is very low. So we've never had to play the pricing game, but we can if we need to. But at the end of the day, there's risk. The number one drivers for storage are death, divorce, downsizing, and displacement. Like, you're moving from your job, somebody's going to a nursing home, or you're empty nesters, or somebody's moving back home with their parents, or whatever. The national average occupancy for storage a couple years ago was 93. Part of that was because COVID forced everybody to move furniture out and create an office from home all of a sudden.
Mhm.
Now it's 87% because the housing market is effectively frozen from the interest rates, right? Now we're expecting a cut on that this month in September, and that should loosen things up, but it's not going to be a light switch and change overnight. So the reality is like self-storage is something that requires patience. These are development deals. And so you have to look at your capital and be like, what's the goal for this money? Do I need to generate cash flow right now to replace income? Or is this like money that I can have some growth potential that I'm going to get a great 4 or 5 year return, but then keep that equity? It can continue to grow long term. My job is not to sell our deals to anyone or to sell storage to anyone.
Yeah.
My job is to educate.
Yeah.
And it's your job to figure out what your goal is for you and your family. And if it lines up, that's great. And if it's not, then don't do it. I do think that there's a really good chance that storage is something that probably should be part of everybody's portfolio. But I will be the first one to tell you, if you are an active real estate investor like you guys are, and you're doing a good job, you will probably make more money doing that than you will investing in passively into syndication. Like you're going to go make 30, 35%, 40%, whatever it is. Now, the difference is you're going to be trading time for money when you do that versus making 21 to 24% and doing it passively, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get rolling before it pays out. So the reality is, yeah, it's a great asset class. Is it great for everybody? Absolutely not. It's different for everybody. It requires some patience. The best thing is just going into it eyes wide open. And whether it's an asset class or an operator, the reality is like we can't change the wind. Our job is to adjust our sails. Like the world's going to throw stuff at us. We want to adjust accordingly because of the extremely low cost basis of conversion projects. There's so much equity in the buildings that it gives us a lot of grace, right? So there's a lot of equity there that even if we're behind on lease up and the cash flow is not where it needs to be, we can more than make up for that on the refinance event or wherever it needs to be. But ultimately that requires trust in the operator and just allowing us to operate the business plan and realize that our job is to adjust course as needed.
Yeah, those are great points. I would also imagine, unlike tenant-based investments, storage might be less subject to regulatory pressures in terms of
Yeah.
things like
There's a moratorium on evictions for non-payment during COVID.
Yeah.
There was not a moratorium on evictions for non-payment
Right.
in storage, but how many storage was delinquent? Less than 4%. Like it's not really discretionary spending. These aren't vacation dollars. These are things that are important to these people that they're paying for. So usually it's just on auto pay and it's happening. But yes, in terms of regulations, you'll get some local regulations of we only want storage in this zone,
Sure.
area zone,
Yeah.
industrial or whatever. But on the national level, no, it's still a very fragmented market. More than 70% of facilities are owned by mom and pop,
Still.
but it is very quickly consolidating. And
Yeah.
there's some really big players and large REITs that are snatching up storage in a big way.
Yeah, that's great. And even though we are active real estate professionals at this point, we do have a passive retirement account that we need to fund. So we definitely look for investments and I'm assuming you guys take self-directed IRAs and different things in your investment.
We do. I took from my medical sales days, I had IRAs and a 401k and I converted it to self-directed funds. I'm not allowed to invest them into Nomad deals. It's
Right.
called commingling because I'm a general partner and it's illegal. But I've specifically taken mine and I have it split out into syndication because I believe in real estate versus paper assets.
Yeah.
And everybody, you want to be diversified, different asset, different geography, different
Right.
operator. And I would argue different time cycles and most importantly, different debt structure. A lot of people over the last 5 years, I talked to one investor who had 7 different investments. 5 of them paused distributions. 2 of them had a capital call. And then one of them that had a capital call ended up being a total loss.
Yeah.
Because even though they were different assets, different geography, different operators, they all were on the same variable rate debt level. So when the interest rates shot up higher and faster than they ever have, everybody got caught.
Yeah.
So it looked like he was diversified from the outside, and that's not the case. So that level of diversification is obviously what you want, especially for something safe like retirement dollars.
Painful lesson. Yes, we've had a few of those ourselves. It's fine. You want to close us out?
Yes, I hope we have time. But Clint, we like to end each episode with gratitude. Do you have anybody or anybody's? Doesn't have to be one person that you want to shout out to that has been instrumental to your journey and where you are today.
Obviously, so I married my best friend. So my wife and I have been married for 12 years. They got a 5-year-old and a soon to be 2-year-old. And we were friends for years before that. And then we've done this real estate investing journey together. That's first and foremost. It goes without saying. Outside of that, yeah, my general partners have been incredible, especially Eric and Levi Hemingway. They've taught me a lot about risk and about the importance of doing things for and with family. And all four of us general partners, Neil Henderson is our other partner, is incredible. And all of us have children. Like Eric's got 6 kids. His son Levi has 3 and a 4th on the way. Neil's got a 10-year-old son, 5 and 2-year-old son. So like we're doing this together and we're doing it for them with the intention of doing it with them. So everything that like all the words that I'm saying, like most of this didn't come out of my head. It came from being surrounded by people that have a good heart and good ethics and good intelligence. And I feel gratitude every day because I'm not putting on scrubs and going to the hospital and being on call. And the last thing I'll say about that is I thought that when I left medical sales behind, I was really worried about not feeling like I was helping anybody anymore in a meaning, like in a saving lives kind of way. But the reality is, and I don't mean to overstate that, I was a very small piece of a very big machine. But the reality is you can get that gratitude in whatever you're doing if you approach it with the right attitude. And that in and of itself, I feel a lot of gratitude for that.
Yeah, partners are there's not much better than finding really great partners. And Ligia and I were just talking about what you just said this morning about you can really find gratitude and purpose in almost any endeavor. And so it's just a matter of framing it in the right way. Clint, it's been a real joy and a pleasure and a lot of education. Have enjoyed it so much. Appreciate you giving us some of your time. And we're certainly grateful for all you're doing and look forward to staying connected in the future.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Talk
Dylan.
later. Bye.
For those of you joining us today, we hope you enjoyed this time in the Champions Corner as much as we did. Got some awesome takeaways, and most importantly, will take action to continue living your best life and maximizing your potential. Mindset is such an important aspect of life, and when coupled with action, delivers undeniably powerful results.
Please subscribe to the podcast to hear from more great guests and get the latest mindset mastery insights and cash flow matchups.
Again, thank you so much for investing your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast.